Hello and welcome back. We've got another question today. Let's have a look. Brian needs to borrow $20,000. He finds a loan that charges 15% per annum flat rate interest over 4 years. Calculate the amount of interest that Brian must pay on this loan. So we've got a lot to unpack here. We've got an amount of money. We've got an interest rate and a period of time. Now, we've got to think about, is this a simple interest question or is it a compound interest question? So we're looking for a specific phrase that tells us which one it is, and that is flat rate. And flat rate, that's just another way of saying simple interest. So we want to use the simple interest problem for calculating the amount of interest that Brian must pay on the loan. So that would just be our simple interest formula, I equals P R T. And let's write down what each of these means. I is your interest in dollars, not the interest rate. P is our principal, and in our case it is $20,000. We have the rate, which is 15%, and we could write that as a decimal, 0.15. And we have time, which is 4 years. And then we just substitute all of our values in. So we will have I equals 20,000 times 0.15 times 4. And if we put that in our calculators, we'll get something. We'll get something like $12,000. And that's A. A just wants the interest. And we've got the interest just by using the simple interest formula because it says flat rate. Now for B. B asks us to calculate the total amount Brian must repay on the loan. So the total amount, that's just going to be our original amount, which is the principal, plus the interest. Interest is just any extra. So if we add these together, 20,000 for our principal, and the interest, we just calculated that. That'll be 12,000, and we add them together to get $32,000. That's it. Now for question C. Brian repays the loan in 4 equal annual installments. Calculate the amount of each installment. Okay, well, we know he has to pay back $32,000. And there's 4 equal annual installments. And we just have to work out how much each of those are. So we just need to divide this by 4. And that will be the repayments. And if you grab your calculators, 32,000 divided by 4, that's just $8,000. And that will be the repayment. Now for D. D is looking pretty big, but let's have a look. Brian can borrow the $20,000 at 15% reducible interest instead of flat rate interest. If Brian makes the same annual repayment, we've just worked that out, $8,000, at the end of the first 3 years, and the balance in the 4th, calculate the amount of money that Brian will save. Oof, alrighty. So we're using a lot of the same information. We've got principal is $20,000. Let's highlight that. What color should we use? Maybe a yellow. We've got $20,000 still. You know what? Not a fan of the yellow. Maybe a darker color. Ooh. Maybe a lighter one. Oh yeah, that looks good. Principal, 20,000. Our interest rate is 15% per annum. And we've got this phrase here, reducible interest instead of flat rate. Reducible interest means the interest is getting less and less. So that specific phrase, reducible, tells us we have to make a loan repayment schedule. If Brian makes the same annual repayment, well, we've just calculated that. That's this $8,000 here. So we know our repayment value in the loan repayment schedule at the end of the first 3 years, and the balance in the fourth. Balance is just the remaining amount. That just means the owing amount will turn to 0. Calculate the amount of money that Brian will save. So we have to compare something. So if Brian paid $12,000 interest, we can compare how much interest he'll pay in the loan repayment schedule and see how much money he'll save. So D, pretty big problem, but it's made up of lots of little steps. So first we got to think about the headings of our loan repayment schedule. One way you could do that is year, balance, interest, and this interest is the dollar amount, not the percentage. Then we have the repayment and balance owing, and that's just at the end of whatever year it is. So we have 4 years because it says at the end of the first 3 years and the balance in the fourth. So we can fill this column in like this. Next up is the balance. So at the beginning, we've got a loan that is $20,000. The interest, well, that's going to be 15% of this amount of the balance. So if we just work out the interest is $20,000 times 0.15, what will we get? We'll get $3,000. And the repayment, we worked that out in question C, that'll be $8,000. $8,000 there. And our balance owing, what is our balance owing? Well, we've got a loan of $20,000. There's interest getting added on, which is $3,000, and then we take away the repayment because we're reducing the amount that we have to pay for the loan. So for balance owing, we just add 20,000 with 3,000 and minus 8,000, and that will give us 15,000. And the balance at the beginning of year 2 is the same as the balance at the end of year 1. So we can just write 15,000 there. Now we have to work out interest again. And interest is going to be 15% of this balance at the beginning of year 2. So we can work that out to the side here, or if you want, you can just put that in your calculator. But when you do, you'll get 2,250. And our repayment will stay the same. It says the same annual repayment at the end of the first 3 years. So if we wanted to, we could fill this in. And we know all those repayments for the first 3 years. Balance owing, same thing again. Balance plus interest minus repayment would be 9,250. And the balance at the beginning of year 3 is the same as the end of year 2. Our interest, we can calculate that again. And if you put that in your calculator, it'll be 1,387.50. Repayment still 8,000, and balance owing, that'll be 2,637.50. The balance at the beginning of year 4, we're almost at the end now, 2,637.50. That's just from the balance owing at the end of year 3. The interest, that'll be 395.625, but because we're dealing with money, we want to round that to 2 decimal places. So let's make that a 6-3. And our repayment, we want our balance to be 0 at the end of the 4th year, because it says, and the balance in the 4th year, that's the payment in the 4th year. So the balance is going to be whatever we have to pay to make it 0. So that'll be 2,637.50 plus 395.63, which will be $3,033.13. Now, what do we have to do? We have to still compare. How can we compare? Well, what are we comparing? We're calculating the amount of money that Brian will save. So there's a few ways we could do this. Let's have a look at both of them and see, you can choose which one you like. If we worked out the total interest that would be $7,033.13. When we did the simple interest, we saw our interest was $12,000. So if we compared 12,000 and 7,033.13, we could see how much money Brian saved. Another way we could do that is compare the repayments and figure out how much Brian paid all up. And we could also compare that to how much Brian paid here, the final amount that Brian would have to pay. So if we add up the total repayments, we will get $33.13. So let's compare interest. You'll have to pretend that says interest. Now we've got $12,000 minus $7,033.13, and we'll get something. I don't know what that something will be. Maybe you guys can work it out. Should I work it out too? Yeah. All right. Fair enough. That'll be $4,966.87. So that's how much money Brian will save. Let's compare that with the total amount that Brian repays in the repayments. So if we compare the total paid. So in the simple interest, in the flat rate interest, Brian would pay $32,000, and using the reducible interest, he would pay $33.13. And if we put that in our calculator, you will get the exact same amount of money. Of course, Brian will save the exact same amount of money no matter which method you use. It's up to you which you'd like. I think comparing the interest is a little bit easier. But that is it for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.